The first time I heard the bottles clink under 800 feet of water, I thought it was Christmas. That sounds stupid now, saying it out loud like that. Like I was some wide-eyed idiot romanticizing a place that literally wants to kill you if you make one mistake. But if you've never lived below the thermocline, if you've never slept with your cheek against a bulkhead that creaks like an old man's knees while the ocean presses on it from every direction, you don't get how small joys get amplified. They become religion. Down in Pelican Bay habitat, we had routines the way land people have weather. Immutable, predictable. You didn't question them, you just lived inside them. Pelican Bay wasn't one of those shiny tourist domes with glass walls and cocktail bars. It was a corporate residential ring built for a deep-sea drilling project, and then repurposed when the well went dry and the military decided the location wasn't useful. That's what they told us. Useful. Nobody in my family ever got a straight answer beyond that. My dad was a ballast tech. My mom ran comms for the civilian side. They moved us down there because the pay was ridiculous and the surface was, in their words, falling apart anyway. The habitat was laid out like a cul-de-sac underwater, a circular corridor loop. People called it the loop, with little living modules branching off like houses. Each module had the same shape, the same bolted door, the same emergency pressure hatch. Kids rode scooters around the loop, kicking off the rubberized floor and gliding past each other, leaving foggy handprints on the plexi viewports. Adults traded gossip over recycled coffee at the galley, and everybody knew everybody, because where the hell were you going to go? The ocean was the only outside, and outside didn't care about your name. Every other day, at exactly 0400, the supply skiff on the surface would lower a sealed crate down the guideline to the cargo lock. The crate held our milk. That's what everybody called it. Milk. Technically, it was nutrient suspension. White, thick, faintly sweet, fortified with whatever vitamins you can't get when your sunlight is a timer-controlled LED panel. It came in heavy, clear poly bottles the size of a forearm, each one capped with a pressure valve and a tamper ring. The label was always the same, a blue wave logo, Marrow Foods, batch number, and a little cartoon dolphin, like a joke. As a kid, I was a kid down there, maybe 12 when this started. I love that part of the routine. I'd go to bed with the empty bottle sitting outside our hatch, wedged into the little wall bracket, and I'd wake up with a fresh one waiting there, like it materialized out of the dark. It felt like the ocean itself was feeding us. My parents used to laugh at me for it. Not mean laugh, just tired. That deep sea tired where everything is a little slower because you're always one alarm away from catastrophe. You and your damn milk, Dad would say, rubbing his eyes with knuckles that always smelled faintly of grease and brine. You know, it's just a crate in the lock, right? Yeah, I'd say and grin anyway. But it's like magic. Magic is how people die. Mom would mutter, half joking, half not. She wasn't wrong. Down there, you respected physics like it was a god. The milkman was whoever did the early run, a cargo tech assigned to push the crate along the loop on a little electric trolley, swap empties for fulls, check the bracket seals, and move on. We didn't have actual delivery trucks, obviously. We had a narrow corridor, sodium lights, and a trolley that hummed like a mosquito. The milkman for most of that year was a guy named Rourke. Round face, red cheeks, kind eyes that always looked like he'd just woken up. He wore the standard coveralls with the civilian patch and a knit cap pulled low because the habitat was always cold as hell, even with the heaters running. Rourke would whistle, sometimes as he rolled the trolley, little tuneless bits that echoed down the loop and mixed with the constant background. The distant thrum of pumps, the occasional hiss of an air scrubber cycling, the faint drip, drip, drip of condensation in the gutter channels. I'd hear him and get that stupid Christmas feeling in my chest. One day, I don't know why I did it. I think I just wanted to be part of the magic instead of just receiving it. I set my bunk alarm for 0330. My parents were asleep, faces turned toward each other, breathing in sync like they were trying to convince themselves the world was stable. I slid out of bed, careful not to let my bare feet slap the floor, and padded to the viewport in the living module. Our module didn't have a direct window to the sea. Most of them didn't. Corporate didn't want people staring into the abyss and getting ideas. We had an internal viewport that looked out onto the loop like a little fisheye window. I popped the privacy cover and pressed my face to the cold plexi. The loop was empty at that hour, lit in pale greenish light. The corridor curved away in both directions, disappearing into itself. The emergency lights made everything look like an aquarium at night. At 0358, I heard the trolley before I saw it. Not loud, just a soft electric whine and the clink of bottles knocking against each other in their crate. Then the trolley rounded the bend, and there was Rourke pushing it with both hands, shoulders hunched, breath making little clouds in front of him. He looked exactly the way he always did. Tired, cheerful in that forced way people get when they're doing something repetitive in a place that could flood them if it got bored. He stopped at the bracket outside the module across from us, swapped the bottle, and scribbled something on his clipboard. Then he rolled forward toward our hatch. My heart was pounding like I was about to do something illegal. When he reached our bracket, he crouched and lifted the empty bottle with one hand. His other hand was already reaching into the crate for a fresh one. I cracked my window latch. The internal viewport wasn't supposed to open. Technically, it was just a panel, but somebody had modified ours long before we moved in. People did that a lot down there. You learn not to ask questions. I pushed it open just enough to stick my head out and whisper, "Hey." Rourke jerked like I'd shot him. The empty bottle slipped from his grip, hit the floor with a sharp crack, and spiderwebbed. White residue splattered the rubber mat in slow, thick arcs. The sound echoed, and for a second the whole loop felt like it held its breath. "Jesus," Rourke hissed, then looked up. His face was round and flushed, and his eyes were wide with that startled, animal panic you get when something unexpected happens in a place where unexpected is usually deadly. He saw me, a skinny kid in an oversized hoodie, hair sticking up, grinning like an idiot. The panic flickered into irritation, an actual scowl, his brows dropping, lips tightening. Then it melted, like somebody switched it off. He let out a long breath and chuckled, quiet. "You little shit," he muttered, but there was no heat in it. "Sorry," I said, still grinning. "I just wanted to see." "See what?" "Me doing my glamorous job." He bent and picked up the broken bottle pieces, wincing when a shard cut his glove. "Don't sneak up on people down here, okay? People have heart attacks for less." "I didn't think you'd." "Yeah, you didn't." He shook his head, but he was smiling now. He reached into the crate, pulled out a fresh bottle, and set it into our bracket with a careful twist so the valve sat right. Then he adjusted his cap like an old-timey delivery guy and tipped it at me. "All the best," he said, and started collecting the broken pieces into a little bag he carried. I watched him work, fascinated. When he was done, he slapped a small adhesive note onto the bracket, right under the bottle, and rolled the trolley onward. I closed the viewport and just stood there, holding my breath, as the trolley's hum faded around the curve. When my parents woke up and saw the broken bottle mess in the loop gutter channel outside our hatch, somebody must have come by later and swept most of it, but you could still see the white streaks. They assumed I'd gotten bored and smashed it. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Dad snapped, rubbing his temples. He had the kind of temper that came from working with heavy equipment and constant low-grade fear. "It wasn't me," I said too fast. "It was Rourke." I startled him. He dropped it. Mom's eyes narrowed. "You startled him?" I nodded and told him the whole thing. How I woke up early, how I said hi, how he jumped. Dad stared at me like I'd just admitted to cutting the oxygen line for fun. "You opened the viewport?" "It's not like outside," I protested. "It's just a loop. That viewport is there for emergencies," Mom said, voice sharp. "Not so you can play mailman." I didn't. "Don't," Dad cut in, pointing a finger. "Do not fuck around with the habitat. You want to get all of us killed? You want to dump seawater into the loop because you wanted to watch bottles clink?" "I didn't open it all the way," I said, and felt my ears burn. He wasn't listening. He launched into a lecture about pressure differentials and seals, about how one kid's curiosity becomes everybody's funeral. Mom backed him up. I took my punishment, grounded from scooter time, extra chores, a long, humiliating talk about safety culture. But when they weren't looking, I peeled the adhesive note off the bracket and hid it in my hoodie pocket like contraband. Later, in my bunk, I unfolded it. Rourke's handwriting was messy, slanted like he wrote fast. Sorry about the bottle. I don't carry a sweeper down the loop at 4 a.m. Your young lad gave me a fright. All the best. Rourke. I stared at it until my eyes watered. It wasn't just a note. It was proof that the Milkman was real, that the magic had a face, a name, a moment. I tucked into my bedside drawer like it was a treasure map. At school, we had school down there, a little classroom module where the kids did lessons on tablets with a teacher who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. I told everyone. Not in a braggy way, more like I couldn't keep it inside. I wanted somebody else to feel what I felt. Some kids got it. Little Mia from Module 3A squealed and asked to see the note. I showed her, and she giggled like it was a love letter. Other kids rolled their eyes. Dude, said Carter, an older boy who was 14 and thought he was king because his dad worked military side. You're obsessed with nutrient milk. That's the saddest thing I've ever heard. It's not just milk, I snapped. It's literally milk, Carter said, and his friends laughed. You gonna marry the milkman? Shut up. Milk boy, Carter sang, loud enough for everyone to hear. Little Milk Boy's got a note from his boyfriend. I punched him. I didn't even think. My fist connected with his shoulder because he turned last second and it still hurt like hell. He shoved me back. We ended up on the floor, scrabbling, my knee slamming into the rubber mat, his elbow catching my jaw. The teacher yanked us apart and sent us both to the admin module, where my mom got called in because she ran comms and everybody knew her. Dad found out later and gave me that look like I'd disappointed him down to the bone. You don't swing at people, he said, voice low. Not down here. I started. I don't care what he was. Down here, you don't create chaos. Chaos kills. He leaned closer. Do you understand me? I did. I understood. I also hated him a little in that moment because he didn't understand what it felt like to have something pure and stupid and small ripped apart. That night, nursing my sore jaw, I set my alarm again. I told myself it was because I wanted to prove Rourke was normal, that the whole thing was just a funny accident. If I'm being honest, if I'm actually telling this like I promised myself I would, I think I wanted the magic back. I wanted that first clink feeling again. I wanted a world where a milkman tipped his cap and left notes, and nothing darker lived in the water outside. At 0345, I woke up and went to the viewport. The loop was emptier than usual. I don't mean physically. I mean the air felt wrong. Even through plexi and recycled oxygen, you could sense it. Like when the power flickers and you realize how fragile everything is. At 0358, the trolley hum started up again, rounding the bend. But the clinking sound, the bottle clink I loved, was gone. The trolley came into view and rolled forward like a ghost. The crate was full. I could see bottles stacked in their foam slots. But they didn't make any noise. Not a clink, not a rattle, nothing. The person pushing it wasn't Rourke. At first I thought it was just the lighting. The loop lights could play tricks. People looked taller, thinner, stretched. Then the figure stepped closer and my throat tightened. He was taller than Rourke by at least a head, maybe more. His coveralls hung weird like they didn't fit. The legs were too long, the knees bending outward slightly when he walked, as if the joints were in the wrong place. His boots struck the floor with a soft, careful sound, like he didn't want to make noise. His cap was pulled low, shadowing his face. I couldn't see his eyes. He stopped at the bracket across the loop and set down 2 bottles. We only ever got 1 per delivery. Everybody got 1. It was counted, rationed. 2 bottles would have been noticed immediately. He picked up the empty bottle from the bracket. His back was to me. His shoulders rose and fell once like a sigh. Then he turned back toward the trolley. The empty bottle was gone. Not like he set it in the crate. Not like he carried it. It was just not there. I leaned closer to the viewport, pressing my nose to the cold plexi. He rolled the trolley to the next bracket. Ours. My hand went to the latch automatically like last time, and then I stopped. I don't know how to explain the instinct. It wasn't a thought. It was my body deciding to live. A hard, sudden surge of don't. Something about him, about the way he moved, about the silence around the trolley, made my skin crawl. I froze with my fingers on the latch, not opening it, barely breathing. He crouched at our bracket. His hands were wrong. Not deformed exactly, just too thin, too long. Fingers that looked like they had an extra joint. Glove, but the glove stretched tight over the knuckles, showing the shape. He set down 2 fresh bottles in our bracket, one behind the other, like he was generous. Then he reached for our empty bottle. He lifted it slowly. He raised it to his face, and I heard it. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet, steady sound like somebody eating cereal in a silent room, like teeth meeting hard plastic and then going through it anyway. My stomach lurched. He was chewing the bottle. The cap bobbed slightly with emotion, still hiding his face. I couldn't see his mouth, but I could hear it, the way the bottle gave under pressure, the way it cracked. For a second, I thought I was hallucinating. Nitrogen narcosis, they called it, except we weren't diving. We were just living at pressure. But people did get weird down there. CO2 headaches, hypoxia dreams, your brain playing tricks because it couldn't handle the fact that you were underwater and pretending it was normal. Then he tilted his head, just a fraction, like he was listening. And somewhere deep in the habitat, through the pumps, through the ventilation, I heard a sound that didn't belong. A ping, not the normal sonar ping you'd hear when military did drills. This was closer, muffled, like something tapping a spoon against the outside of the hull. Ping. My skin went cold. The tall milkman's head angled a little more, like he appreciated it. Then he set the 2 bottles perfectly aligned, wiped his gloved hand on his thigh, and rolled the trolley away, disappearing around the curve as silently as he arrived. I stood there until my legs started shaking. When my parents woke up, I was sitting at the table, both bottles still outside the hatch, untouched. Dad frowned. Why are there 2? Mom checked the bracket like it was a mistake. That's odd. He's different, I said. Dad snorted. Who? The milkman. It's not Rourke. He's taller. And he. My throat tightened as I remembered the sound. He ate the bottle. He ate the empty bottle. Dad stared at me for half a second, then laughed sharp. What the hell are you talking about? I saw it, I insisted. He chewed it. Like glass. Like nothing. Mom's face went pale in that way it did when she was trying not to show fear in front of me. She turned to Dad. Rourke might have switched shifts. Yeah, Dad said, rolling his eyes. And our kid's been having nightmares because he got into a fight at school. He's stressed. It wasn't a dream. I snapped louder than I meant to. Why would I make that up? Dad's expression hardened. Because you want attention. Because you're bored. Because you're still on that stupid note like it's some holy relic. He jabbed a finger toward the hatch. Bring the bottles in. Your mom's got comm shift. I'm on ballast at 6. No, I said. Dad blinked like he didn't understand the word. I'm not drinking it, I said, voice shaking. It's wrong. Dad exhaled through his nose. You're not starting this. It's not safe, I said, and hated how childish I sounded. Mom stepped between us, hands up. Okay, let's not. She reached for one of the bottles, turning it in her hands. The liquid inside was white like always. Thick, opaque. It looked normal. She twisted the cap, broke the tamper ring, sniffed it. It smells fine, she said, but her voice had that slight tremor like she wasn't convinced. Dad grabbed the bottle from her and took a long pull, swallowing like it was nothing. There, he said, wiping his mouth. See? If it was poison, I'd be dead. Now stop being dramatic. Mom hesitated, eyes flicking to me. Istère de hair. Don't. She looked away, like she couldn't handle my face, and drank anyway. Something inside me cracked. Dad poured the milk into his coffee. Mom dumped some in her cereal. The way it slid thick and slow made my stomach flip. I pushed my bowl away. Dad slammed his spoon down. Eat. No. He stood up so fast his chair scraped the floor. Do you have any idea what it costs to keep you alive down here? I didn't ask to be here, I shot back. His eyes flashed. For a second, he looked like he might actually hit me. And then, maybe because Mom was watching, he didn't. He just leaned in close, voice low and vicious. You don't get to refuse rations. You don't get to make problems. You want to live? You eat what you're given. I'm not drinking it, I said, and my voice broke on the last word. He grabbed my arm hard. His fingers left white marks. Fine, don't drink it, but you will sit here until you finish your food. Mom flinched. Don't. Dad ignored her. I sat there, tears hot in my eyes, staring at the bowl, at the white liquid soaking the cereal like it was drowning it. I didn't eat. Dad's punishment came later. Not a beating. Not exactly. A hard smack to the back of my thigh when I tried to stand up and leave. A sharp, you don't define me, delivered through clenched teeth. I went to school with a sore leg and a rage in my chest that felt like it might drown me from the inside. In the classroom module, the air smelled like disinfectant and damp socks. The teacher, Ms. Halvorsen, was writing math problems on the smartboard with her back to us, shoulders tense like she was holding herself together by force. Kids filed in quiet. Too quiet. I found Mia and grabbed her elbow. Did you get 2 bottles? She blinked at me, slow. Yeah. My stomach sank. Did you see him? The milkman. Mia smiled. Not a normal smile. Too wide. Too calm. He brought extra. Did he look wrong? She tilted her head. He looked helpful. Did you drink it? Mia nodded, eyes bright. It was the sweetest milk I ever had. She said it like she'd rehearsed it. I let go of her elbow like it burned me. I went down the line, asking the other kids from the loop. Same answer. 2 bottles. Sweetest milk. Helpful milkman. Carter, my enemy, my tormentor, walked in with a bottle in his hand like he wanted everyone to see it. He caught my eye and grinned. You didn't drink yours, did you? He said, voice loud enough for a few people to hear. I clenched my fists. Shut up. He leaned closer, and his breath smelled faintly sweet like powdered sugar. My dad says they're increasing rations. Says the military approved it. You're gonna look real stupid when you're the only one not getting the upgrade. I saw him eat the bottle. I hissed. Carter laughed. Sure you did, milk boy. Normally, I would have swung again. Normally, I would have lost my temper and given him what he wanted. But something about the way he said it, so casual, so sure, made my anger fizzle into fear. Because if the milkman was wrong and everybody else was acting like it was fine, what did that mean? Ms. Halvorsen turned around, clapped her hands once. Okay, settle. We're starting. She looked different. Her hair was tied back tighter than usual. Her eyes were wide, pupils slightly dilated, like she'd been staring into a flashlight. She smiled at us. I'm proud of you, she said. The whole class went still. Ms. Halvorsen wasn't the proud of you type. She was the if you don't do your work, you'll end up scrubbing algae filters type. I'm proud of how kind you've been lately, she continued, voice soft. How thoughtful. How connected. A few kids nodded. Mia clasped her hands together like she was at church. My stomach twisted. Ms. Halvorsen started teaching, but the lesson wasn't normal. She drew a diagram on the board. Circles within circles, lines branching, numbers above them. Not math I recognized. Not anything we'd been learning. Count the nodes, she said, tapping the board. How many connections? How many ways to route the current? Kids raised their hands immediately. All of them, like a wave. I sat there, frozen, staring at the diagram until it blurred. Ms. Halvorsen pointed at Mia. Mia answered in a monotone, rattling off numbers that made no sense. Ms. Halvorsen nodded like it was perfect. She pointed at Carter. Carter answered, same cadence, same weird certainty. Every kid answered. Every kid got it right. Every kid smiled afterward like they'd just done something wonderful. I didn't raise my hand once. Ms. Halvorsen eventually looked at me. Her smile didn't fade, but her eyes sharpened. You're quiet today. I don't understand, I said, and my voice sounded small even to me. That's okay, she said, like it was a comfort. You will. Something in the way she said made my skin prickle. After class, the kids didn't run around the loop like they used to. They didn't argue about games or trade snacks or race scooters. They walked in a line, a literal line, single file, hands lightly touching the shoulder of the person in front of them, moving down the loop corridor like they were following an invisible path. I stood off to the side, watching them pass. Their faces were calm, serene, like they were sleepwalking on purpose. Carter paused when he passed me, just long enough to whisper, "You'll drink it." Then he stepped back into the line and kept walking. That evening, my parents were not my parents. They were still shaped like them. Same faces, same voices, but the way they moved was off, like their joints didn't quite belong to them anymore. Dad came home from ballast with his coveralls unzipped, sweat dampening his collar. Usually he'd drop his bag, swear about a stuck valve, complain about the military side hogging resources. This time he walked straight to me, grabbed my shoulders, and pulled me into a hug so hard it hurt. "I love you," he said into my hair. I stiffened. Dad didn't hug. Not like that. He pulled back and looked at me with wet eyes. "I'm sorry," he said. I blinked. "What?" "I'm sorry I've been harsh," he said, voice thick. "I was raised that way. It's not an excuse. It's just," he swallowed. "It's just what I knew." Mom came in behind him, eyes shining, hands pressed together like she was praying. She wrapped her arms around my waist and squeezed. "I wanted you," she whispered, voice trembling. "I wanted you so much. Sometimes I look at you and She pressed her face into my shirt like she wanted to crawl inside me. My skin crawled. "Stop," I said, pushing at them. Dad let go immediately, like he didn't want to force me. Mom released me too, stepping back with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We're just grateful," Mom said softly. "We're grateful you're here." Dad nodded. "We don't want to hurt you anymore." I stared at them, trying to reconcile this sudden tenderness with the man who'd smacked my thigh that morning for refusing cereal. "Did you drink the extra bottle?" I asked and my voice shook. Dad's smile widened slightly. "Yes." Mom's eyes flicked to the bracket outside our hatch. "There will be more," she said. Outside, the kids were in the loop. I could hear them through the thin module wall. Soft footsteps, faint laughter. I opened the hatch and stepped out, hoping, stupidly, that maybe the kids would be normal, that maybe they'd still want to play war games or talk shit or race scooters. They were holding hands. All of them. A circle in the middle of the loop, under the main lights, fingers linked like some creepy kindergarten activity. Mia saw me and beamed. "Come join. We're playing Peace," another kid said, voice bright. "Peace," I repeated. Carter was in the circle too. He looked at me with that same calm grin. "No fighting," he said. "No wieners. Just together." "I don't want to," I said. Mia's smile faltered for half a second, then returned. "You'll like it." I said no. Their hands tightened, the circle suddenly more solid, like they were reinforcing something. Carter's eyes narrowed slightly. "You always make things hard," he said, not angry, just disappointed, like I was a malfunctioning machine. "Fuck off," I snapped. A few kids gasped, but not in shock. More like I just coughed in a sterile room. Mia's eyes filled with tears. "Why are you mean?" she whispered. "I'm not." I started, then stopped. Because I was mean, I was the only one not smiling, the only one not holding hands, the only one looking at them like they were possessed. The circle started to sway, slow, not dancing, not skipping, just swaying like seaweed in a current. I backed away, heart pounding, and retreated into my module, slamming the hatch harder than necessary. I pressed my ear to the metal. Their soft voices drifted through, overlapping. Not words I could make out, just murmurs, like a crowd praying. That night, the bracket outside our hatch held 3 bottles. 3. The label still said nutrient milk. Same dolphin, same wave logo, but the liquid inside wasn't white anymore. It was gray, thick, lumpy, like something tried to curdle and failed. When I lifted one bottle, the contents moved reluctantly like sludge. Dad came up behind me, took a bottle, and cracked the cap. He didn't even sniff it. He just tilted it back and drank. The sound of him swallowing made my stomach roll. Mom did the same. Neither of them grimaced. Neither of them reacted like it tasted bad. They drank like they were thirsty in a way I'd never seen. "Stop," I said, voice hoarse. "That's not right." Dad wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. His eyes looked glassy, like he'd been crying, but his expression was peaceful. "It's fine," he said. "It's gray," I snapped. "It's fucking gray." Mom's gaze softened. "Colors change," she said gently, like she was soothing a toddler. "It's still nourishment." "It's not," I started. Dad held out the third bottle toward me. "Drink." My chest tightened. "No." He didn't get angry. That was worse. He just nodded slowly, like he accepted it. "Okay," he said. "Not yet. Not yet." Those two words lodged in my brain like a hook. The next day at school, everything was wrong. Not just the kids. Not just Ms. Halvorson. Everything. The screens in the classroom flickered between lesson slides and blocks of symbols. Not letters. Not numbers. Symbols that looked like someone tried to write math underwater and gave up. Curves and angles and dots, repeating patterns that made my eyes ache. Ms. Halvorson didn't seem bothered. She pointed at the symbols and asked questions in a calm voice. "Which sequence stabilizes the pressure?" she asked. Every hand shot up. I looked around. Kids' faces were slack with focus, eyes fixed on the screen like it was the most beautiful thing they'd ever seen. I felt like I was looking at strangers wearing my friend's skin. At lunch, instead of trading snacks, kids sat in silence, drinking gray milk from bottles like it was communion. The sweet smell filled the air, cloying and wrong. I tried to talk to Mia. "Do you remember the scooter races?" She blinked at me. "We don't need races." "Do you remember when Carter stole your tablet and you cried?" Mia frowned slightly, like I'd asked her to remember a dream. "That wasn't important." "It was important to you," I insisted. Mia's eyes softened. "Nothing hurts anymore," she said, and smiled like it was a gift. Carter walked by, heard that, and chuckled. "He doesn't get it," he said, like I wasn't there. "He likes hurting. I like being real," I snapped. Carter's grin didn't move. "Drink the milk," he said. "Then you'll stop being alone." The word alone hit me harder than it should have, because I was. After school, the kids lined up again and walked down the loop, hands on shoulders, silent procession. I trailed behind at a distance, watching. They stopped at the central hub, the one place in the habitat that had a moon pool, a vertical shaft of water sealed behind thick glass. The military used it for diving ops and equipment transfer. Kids weren't supposed to go near it, but there they were, standing in a semicircle in front of the moon pool viewport, staring into the black water like it was a TV. The water behind the glass was dark as ink. You couldn't see more than a foot into it. Sometimes, if the external floodlights were on, you catch a glimpse of drifting particles like snow. The kids stood perfectly still. I crept closer, heart hammering. From the other side of the glass, from somewhere in the black water, came a sound. Knock, knock, knock. Not loud, not like somebody pounding, more like a polite tapping, like a code. The kids didn't flinch. They didn't react like it was weird. They just stared, faces calm, like they were listening. Carter whispered, barely audible. "There." Mia whispered back, "Yes." I swallowed hard. "What is that?" I hissed, and my voice sounded huge in the quiet. Every head turned toward me at once. That's not an exaggeration. All of them, in perfect unison, their eyes fixed on me. Calm, soft, expectant. Carter stepped forward, and for the first time in days, there was something like irritation on his face. Not anger, not rage, just annoyance, like I was interrupting a song. "You're not supposed to be here," he said. "You're not supposed to be here." Mia echoed, same exact tone, like she was reading his words off a screen. A few kids murmured it too. Not a chant, a confirmation. I backed away, hands up. "Fine. Whatever. I'm leaving." As I retreated, the knocking from the water changed. It got faster. Top, 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 top. Like whatever was out there had noticed me too. I ran. I sprinted back to my module, lungs burning, feet slipping slightly on the rubber floor. The habitat felt narrower than it ever had, the loop curving endlessly like it wanted to trap me. When I slammed into our hatch and spun the wheel to seal it, my hand was shaking so badly I almost fumbled it. Inside, Dad and Mom were sitting at the table, bottles in front of them. For bottles now, the liquid inside was darker. Not gray anymore. Black. Not like chocolate milk. Like oil. Like the deep sea itself had been poured into plastic. Dad lifted a bottle and drank without blinking. Mom watched him, then drank hers. Neither spoke. The module felt cold in a way the heaters couldn't fix. I stepped back, pressing myself against the wall. "Why aren't you talking?" I whispered. Dad set the bottle down carefully, cap clicking back into place. He looked at me. His eyes were different. Not glazed, not dreamy. Focused, but on something behind me. Like he wasn't really looking at my face, but through it. He didn't answer. Mom's gaze flicked to the bracket on the wall where the bottles sat. She reached for one and held it out. Her voice was soft. "Drink." I shook my head so hard my neck hurt. "No." Dad's lips moved, almost like he was tasting a word. "Not," he said slowly. Mom finished it. "Yet. Not yet." I stumbled into my bunk area and slammed the privacy curtain shut like fabric could protect me from whatever was happening. I didn't sleep. The habitat noises sounded louder. Every pump cycle felt like a heartbeat. The air scrubber hissed like breathing. Condensation dripped somewhere in the wall, a steady, maddening drip that didn't match the rhythm of anything mechanical. And under it all, every so often, I heard it, a faint ping, like sonar, like something tapping the hull from the outside. Ping, ping, closer than it should have been. At some point, I crawled out of bed and went to the tiny entertainment screen mounted on the wall. Normally, after a bad day, I'd watch whatever recycled movies the Habitat Network had. Old cartoons, stupid sitcoms, anything to remind me there was a surface world with sunlight. The screen flickered on. No cartoons. No sitcoms. Just lines of symbols scrolling across a dark background, accompanied by a ticking sound that made my teeth hurt. Tick, tick, tick. The symbols weren't random. They repeated in patterns. Curves and hooks and dots like the ones from Ms. Halvorson's board, like the ones that made my eyes ache. I stared anyway because what else was there? As I watched, the symbol shifted. The pattern changed. For a split second, I thought I saw something like a reflection, something moving behind the symbols, like a shadow behind glass. I leaned closer. The ticking got louder. Tick, tick, tick. My ears started to ring. I pressed my palms against my temples, trying to make it stop. The screen flashed. For an instant like a blink, I saw a face. Not human. Pale. Smooth. Eyes too far apart. Mouth too wide. And then the screen went back to symbols. I stumbled back, heart slamming in my chest. "No," I whispered, and it came out like a prayer. In the morning, Dad and Mom left for work without saying goodbye. That alone should have told me something was wrong, because even when they were angry, even when we fought, Mom always squeezed my shoulder before leaving. Dad always grunted something like behave, like it was a joke. This time they just went. Each of them drank an entire bottle of black milk first, one after the other, like a ritual, like fuel. Then they walked out, boots quiet, hatch sealing behind them with a soft hiss. I sat at the table, staring at the remaining bottles. For bottles. Black liquid. Labels still smiling dolphins. I decided not to go to school. Not as a rebellion. As survival. I stayed in the module, alone, listening to the habitat breathe. Hours passed. The screen kept ticking in the corner, symbols crawling across it. No matter how many times I turned it off, it turned itself back on, like it wanted me to look. Around midday, I heard footsteps in the loop. Soft, careful. I crept to the viewport and peeked through the plexi. The trolley was there again. The tall milkman pushed it slowly, silently, stopping at each bracket, leaving bottles. He didn't whistle like Rourke. He didn't make a single unnecessary sound. As he passed our module, his head tilted slightly, like he knew I was watching through the glass. My blood went cold. He stopped at our bracket. He didn't crouch this time. He just reached down with those two long fingers and adjusted the bottles already there, aligning them like he was arranging flowers. Then he lifted one bottle, the one Mom had offered me last night, and held it up to his face. Crunch, crunch, crunch. He ate the bottle like it was nothing, like plastic was a wafer. My stomach clenched so hard I thought I might throw up. As he chewed, the habitat lights flickered, just once, and in that flicker, the loop beyond him looked wrong, like the corridor stretched longer than it should, curving into darkness that wasn't there before. Then the lights stabilized and everything was normal again. He finished chewing, swallowed, and set down a fresh bottle in the empty spot. He raised his gloved hand and tapped the bracket twice, gentle, top, top, like knocking. Then he rolled the trolley away, disappearing around the curve. I backed away from the viewport and slid down the wall, hugging my knees. I was 12 years old, underwater, surrounded by people who smiled too wide and didn't argue anymore, in a place where the ocean pressed on the walls like a giant hand. And I realized something that made my throat close. Nobody was going to save me. Not the surface, not the military, not my parents, not the teacher, not the kids holding hands in front of the moon pool. The habitat was a closed system. If something got into it, it didn't leave. It spread. The loneliness hit like pressure in my chest, like I was sinking without moving. I stared at the black bottles on the table. They sat there patiently, like they had all the time in the world. The ticking from the screen filled the module. Tick, tick, tick. Outside, somewhere in the habitat, I heard the faintest sound. Ping. And then, from far away, like through water and metal and distance, something knocked. Once, twice, 3 times. I put my hand on one of the bottles. The plastic was cold, slick with condensation. My fingers trembled. I hated it. I hated that my brain was even considering it. I hated that the bottle felt heavier than it should, like it held more than liquid. But the loneliness was a physical thing now, like a weight on my lungs. I twisted the cap just enough to feel the tamper ring give a tiny snap that sounded way too loud in the quiet module. The black liquid inside didn't slosh. It just waited. My throat tightened. I lifted the bottle toward my mouth, and the smell hit me, sweet, metallic like sugar dissolved in seawater, like blood diluted in brine. My hand shook harder. The screen ticked louder. Tick, tick, tick. And from the loop outside our hatch, I heard soft footsteps approach, stopping right outside like someone standing there listening. I froze, bottle hovering. The footsteps didn't move. Whoever it was, whatever it was, just waited. So did the bottle. So did the ocean. My throat tightened. I lifted the bottle toward my mouth, and the smell hit me, sweet, metallic like sugar dissolved in seawater, like blood diluted in brine. My hand shook harder. The screen ticked louder. Tick, tick, tick. And from the loop outside our hatch, I heard soft footsteps approach, stopping right outside like someone standing there listening. I froze, bottle hovering. The footsteps didn't move. Whoever it was, whatever it was, just waited. So did the bottle. So did the ocean. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the bottle against the wall and watch it shatter, watch the black sludge splash, and prove to myself it was just food, just a fucked up new batch, just corporate being cheap. But I'd already seen the Milkman chew through plastic like it was nothing. And I'd already seen my parents' eyes go somewhere else. The footsteps shifted slightly. A soft scrape, like a boot heel repositioning. Patient, close, then a sound right outside our hatch. Top, top, top. A knuckle, maybe a gloved finger. Gentle, polite. I lowered the bottle a fraction. Go away, I whispered stupidly, like whatever stood out there understood English. The tapping stopped. Silence filled the module, thick as the black liquid. The screen flashed just once, and the symbols on it rearranged into a shape that made my stomach drop, because for half a second it looked like a diagram of the habitat. Our loop drawn in curves, except the loop had extra branches that didn't exist. Like roots. Then it snapped back into crawling nonsense. I pressed the bottle to my lips. Cold plastic. It's all on my own skin. I took the smallest sip I could. The liquid hit my tongue like syrup and seawater at the same time. Sweet, yes, but not in a friendly way. In a way that made my mouth water against my will, like my body recognized it as something it had been starving for. It slid down my throat warm despite the cold. I felt it move, thick, deliberate. My stomach lurched. For a second, I thought I'd vomit. I gagged, eyes watering. Outside the hatch, the footsteps didn't move. Whoever was stayed right there, listening to me swallow. I yanked the bottle away, breathing hard, the taste coating my teeth. I spit once into the sink, and the spit looked darker than it should have, like ink diluted with saliva. No, I said out loud, voice cracking. No, fuck this. The tapping returned, softer. Talp, talp, like reassurance. My hands trembled so badly, I almost dropped the bottle. I stared at it, at the black liquid clinging to the sides, not sloshing, just holding shape. The loneliness in my chest swelled until it felt like pressure, like the habitat around me was filling with water and I was the last pocket of air. I took another sip, then another. The taste stopped being disgusting somewhere around the third swallow. It stopped being something I had to force past my gag reflex and turn into something my body leaned into. Sweetness spread behind my eyes. Warmth climbed up the back of my neck. The constant tightness in my jaw, fear, anger, whatever, loosened like a knot coming undone. The ticking from the screen softened, not quieter exactly, but less painful. Like my ears weren't fighting it anymore. The pumped thrum in the walls stopped sounding like a monster breathing and started sounding like rhythm, like a heartbeat I could match. Outside the hatch, the footsteps shifted again. Then they receded slow, satisfied. I didn't even realize I was crying until I tasted salt on my upper lip and it mixed with the sweetness already in my mouth. I drank more. Not the whole bottle. Not at once. But enough that when I set it down, my hands steadied. I exhaled, long and shaky. The module looked the same, but it didn't feel like a cage anymore. The air didn't feel thin. The walls didn't feel like they were pressing inward. I blinked and realized the symbols on the screen weren't crawling randomly. They were structured. My eyes traced the shapes and, God, I'm trying to tell you how it felt. And it's slippery, like trying to describe a dream you only half remember. My brain started snapping them into meaning. Not words, not language like we speak. More like knowing what comes next, like recognizing a pattern in waves. Tick, tick, tick. It wasn't a ticking. It was counting. A sequence. A call. I got up, slow, and walked toward the screen. The closer I got, the less it hurt. I lifted my hand and hovered my fingers just above the glass. For a second, just a second, the surface of the screen reflected my face, pale and wide-eyed. Then the reflection shifted. Behind my face, like a second layer, there was water, black water, and something pale moving through it, slow, patient. I jerked my hand back. The screen didn't change. The symbols kept scrolling, but my heart didn't slam anymore. It just beat. Steady. I sat down at the table again and stared at the bottle. The label's dolphin smiled up at me like it always had. I laughed once, short and shaky, because it hit me how insane this was, how I just willingly swallowed something that looked like oil because it made the fear stop. And then, like a wave rolling under you, the shame faded. Not erased, just smoothed. I heard my own breath and realized it matched the pump cycle. And out, like I've been fighting the habitat's rhythm my whole life, and only now learned how to float. When my parents came home that night, I didn't hide behind the curtain. I was sitting at the table with the bottle in front of me, cap back on, about a third of it gone. Dad stepped in first. He stopped dead when he saw it. Mom came in behind him, and her hand flew to her mouth, eyes filling with tears. "Oh," she whispered. Dad's face did something complicated. Relief, guilt, something like pride. He stepped forward fast and grabbed my shoulders like he couldn't help himself. "You did it," he said, voice thick. I tried, and my throat closed up. Mom hugged me, gentler than before, like she'd finally remembered how to touch without crushing. You were so lonely, she whispered into my hair. Dad pulled back and looked me in the eyes properly for the first time in days. His pupils were a little wider than normal. His gaze still had that slight faraway quality, but there was warmth in it too. Real warmth. I'm sorry, he said again. For everything. I swallowed and tasted sweetness lingering. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, and the question came out angry even though I didn't mean it to. Dad blinked, like he genuinely had to search for an answer. We couldn't, he said finally. Mom wiped her cheeks with trembling fingers. It's hard to explain until you feel it, she said. Words don't. She shook her head, frustrated, then smiled. But you're here now. I stared at them, and a part of me, the part that still remembered being scared, wanted to demand details. Wanted to scream at them for letting me drown in my own fear while they drank their way into calm. But another part of me, bigger now, softer, just wanted to stop fighting. Dad noticed my hesitation and set a fresh bottle on the table. The liquid inside was black, but it looked less like oil now and more like depth. Like night water. Drink when you want, he said. No anger. No command. Just an offering. I nodded. That should have been the end. That should have been where everything got better. But better is a trap word. Down there, you learn that fast. A pump that sounds better might just be failing in a new way. The next morning, school wasn't school anymore. I walked into the classroom module and felt it immediately, like stepping into a current. The air felt thicker, charged, carrying that sweet metal scent. Kids sat in their seats, hands folded, faces calm. Ms. Halvorsen stood by the board, drawing the same branching circles, only now the diagram didn't look like nonsense. It looked like maps, routes, connections. She turned when I entered, and her smile widened with genuine relief. There you are, she said. Carter looked back over his shoulder. His grin was different now, not mocking, welcoming. He patted the seat beside him, a small gesture that made my chest loosen. He said. Ms. Halvorsen pointed at the diagram. Tell me where the pressure bleeds, she said. A week ago, I would have stared blankly. Now my eyes followed the lines, and I knew. Not because I'd learned it in a normal way, because it felt obvious. There, I said, pointing. If you route it there, it stabilizes the loop. Ms. Halvorsen nodded, satisfied. Good, she said softly. Very good. Everyone's hands lifted, not to answer, but to touch their own throats lightly. A motion so subtle, I almost missed it. Like acknowledging the flow. Like saying, yes, I can feel it too. At lunch, Mia hugged me like she hadn't seen me in years. I missed you, she said, eyes shining. I laughed, and it sounded real. I was right here. No, she said, and her voice went a little distant. You were outside. Outside. That word hit me funny, because we were literally underwater inside a metal ring. But I understood what she meant. Outside the current. Outside the connection. Carter leaned in, voice low. Told you, he said. I should have punched him for that. Instead, I smirked. Shut up, I said, but there wasn't venom in it anymore. He grinned, satisfied, and drank from his bottle. The milk didn't come every other day anymore. It came every day. At first, it was still 2 bottles, then 3, then 4. Different colors, shifting. Sometimes gray again, sometimes black, sometimes a white, so bright it looked wrong in the habitat lighting. People stopped calling it milk out loud, at least in my hearing. They started calling it the ration or the feed or just nothing, like naming it wasn't necessary anymore. The bracket outside our hatch stayed full. Empty bottles vanished faster than I could track. Sometimes I'd wake up and the bottles would already be swapped, and I wouldn't remember hearing the trolley at all, because the trolley never made noise anymore. But I still heard the pings. Always the pings. Sometimes distant, like sonar from far away. Sometimes close enough that the bulkhead vibrated faintly, like someone tapping the hull with a fingernail. I started tapping back without thinking. Just little rhythms on the table, on the wall, on my own bottle. Top, 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 top. It felt like humming along with a song you finally recognized. One afternoon, Dad came home early, face pale under his grease streaks. He didn't go straight for the bottles. He sat at the table and stared at his hands like he wasn't sure what they were. Mom took one look at him and stiffened. "What happened?" Dad swallowed. His throat bobbed. "They're sealing the cargo lock," he said. Mom's eyes widened. "What?" He glanced at me, then away. "Military order." Mom stood so fast her chair toppled. "They can't do that. We need supplies." Dad's laugh was harsh, humorless. "We're not getting supplies from the surface anymore," he said. "Not really." Mom's face went white. "What are you talking about?" Dad rubbed his forehead with dirty fingers. "The crate's coming down. They're not from Marrow Foods." Mom's mouth opened, closed. Dad leaned forward, voice low. "They're from below." Silence hit the module like a pressure wave. I sat there, bottle in my hands, and felt the word below echo through me in a way it hadn't before. But my bones recognized it. Mom whispered, "That's impossible." Dad's eyes flicked up, and for the first time in days, there was something like fear in them. Not the old fear of leaks and valves. A deeper one. "I saw the manifest," he said. "Or what's left of it. The tags are wrong. The military guys aren't even pretending anymore. They call it a handoff." Mom shook her head hard. No, we can't be." Dad's voice cracked. "They've been lowering empties." Mom froze. "Empties?" Dad nodded once, jaw clenched. "Instead of sending empty bottles back up for recycling, they've been lowering them into the moon pool. On a line. Like an offering." My stomach tightened, not with disgust this time, but with a strange, humming anticipation. Mom turned to me, eyes wild. "Did you know this?" she demanded. I opened my mouth and realized I didn't have a normal answer. Because I didn't know it like a fact. I knew it like you know the tide is coming even if you can't see the ocean. "I felt it," I said softly. Mom's eyes flashed with anger. "Felt it?" She spat like it was an insult. She pointed at the bottle in my hands. "That's doing something to us. That's why you're all..." She searched for a word and came up empty, because how do you say it without sounding insane? "Why you're all like this?" Dad's hand shot out and caught her wrist, gentle but firm. "Stop," he said. Mom yanked free. "Don't tell me to stop. I can still think, can't I? I can still..." Her voice wavered. "I can still be afraid." Dad looked at her with something like grief. "You can," he agreed. "But it hurts." Mom's face crumpled. For a second, she looked like she might cry again, but the tears didn't come. She just stood there shaking. "I don't want it," she whispered. Dad's voice went quieter. "You already took it." Mom flinched like he slapped her. Dad reached for his bottle and drank, slow, like he was medicating pain. His shoulders dropped as the sweetness hit. His face smoothed. Mom stared at him like she didn't recognize him. Then she turned on me again. "You're a kid," she said, voice sharp. "You don't get to choose this. Do you hear me?" I felt something flare in my chest. Old anger, old defiance. A memory of my father's finger in my face, of my mother's hand squeezing too tight. "I already chose," I said, and my voice came out steady. Mom's eyes widened like I'd struck her. Dad's gaze flicked to me, and for a second he looked proud again, and that made me feel sick in a way I couldn't name. Mom backed away, shaking her head. "No," she whispered. No, we can't." She turned and rushed out of the module. Dad watched her go, then sighed, heavy. "She'll come back," he said, more to himself than me. "Will she?" I asked, and the question sounded wrong because some part of me already knew the answer. Dad's jaw tightened. "She's strong," he said, "but strength doesn't matter down here. Not against pressure." That night, Mom didn't come home. Dad tried to act normal. He heated up rehydrated noodles, set them on the table, stared at them without eating. He kept glancing at the hatch like he expected Mom to burst in and tell us everything was fine. Around 2300, the comm panel on the wall chirped once, a soft tone reserved for internal alerts. Dad snapped upright and slapped the panel, bringing up a channel. Mom's voice came through, thin and distorted by the habitat network. "In the hub," she said. "Ballast. I need..." Dad leaned in. "Where are you? Are you okay?" A pause. Static hissed, like water over gravel. Then Mom's voice again, softer. "Don't come," she said. Dad's face twisted. "What?" "I can hear it," Mom whispered. "I can hear it knocking. It's right outside the glass." Dad's throat bobbed. "Mom, listen to me. Come back to the module. Please." She laughed, short and breathless. "You say please now," she said, and there was bitterness in it. Old pain bubbling up. "You say please now that I'm—" Her voice wavered. "Now that I'm scared." Dad flinched. "I'm sorry," he said. "I am sorry. Just come back." More static. Then, faintly, behind Mom's voice, I heard something else. A ping. Not through the habitat walls. Through the comm line. Like the sound itself was traveling with her. Mom's breathing hitched. She whispered. "It's beautiful." Dad's eyes widened. "Mom, don't. It's showing me," Mom murmured. "It's showing me the water, the cities." Dad slammed his fist on the table. "Stop talking like that." Mom's voice sharpened, suddenly angry. "Don't you fucking tell me what to do," she snapped. "Not anymore." Silence. Then her voice, quieter, almost tender. "I don't want to be outside," she whispered. Dad's face crumpled. "Then don't. Come home." A long pause. Then Mom's voice again, flat, distant. "I can't move," she said. Dad went pale. "What do you mean you can't move?" "I'm standing at the moon pool," she said, and I could hear the damp echo in her voice, like she was in a larger space. "My feet," she exhaled. "My feet won't go." Dad stood up so fast his chair fell backward. "I'm coming." Mom's voice snapped, urgent. "No, don't. If you come, you'll—" Static surged, cutting her off. Dad slapped the panel again, yelling her name, but the channel was dead. Just hiss. He stood there shaking, eyes wild. Then he looked at me. "Stay here," he said. I stood too. "I'm coming with you." Dad's eyes flashed. "No, I'm not a baby." I snapped, and there was that old anger again, sharp as a broken bottle. If she's. Dad's jaw clenched. He looked like he wanted to argue, to order me to be the old dad. But the new calm pulled at him too, smoothing the edges. He swallowed. "Fine," he said finally, "but you do exactly what I say." We stepped into the loop. The habitat felt different at night. The lights dimmed to a lower setting, casting long shadows. Condensation glittered on the walls like sweat. The air smelled sweeter than usual, like the milk scent had seeped into everything. As we hurried toward the central hub, we passed other modules. Most hatches were shut. A few were open, and inside I glimpsed people sitting in chairs, bottles in hand, staring at screens full of symbols like they were watching fireworks. No one stopped us. No one asked where we were going. It was like the habitat didn't care anymore. We reached the hub. The hub was wider than the loop, a circular chamber with access to the moon pool, the dive lockers, the equipment racks. The moon pool viewport dominated one wall. Thick glass looking down into a vertical shaft of dark water sealed by pressure gates. The emergency lights made the water look blacker. Mom stood in front of the glass. Her posture was rigid, arms at her sides, head tilted slightly, like she was listening. Dad slowed, breath catching. "Honey," he whispered. Mom didn't turn. Dad stepped closer, cautious. "It's me," he said. "I'm here. Come on, let's go back." Mom's hand lifted slowly, fingers trembling, and pressed against the glass. On the other side of the glass, something moved. Not a fish, not silt. A pale shape slid through the black water, close enough that the floodlight caught it for a second. Smooth, long, like an arm, like a ribbon of flesh. Then it vanished into darkness again. Dad sucked in a breath like he'd been punched. I stared, heart pounding, and felt something in me respond. Not fear exactly, but recognition. Like seeing the outline of something you've been dreaming about for days. Mom whispered, "They're down there." Dad's voice shook. "Who?" Mom's head tilted more. "The ones who knock," she murmured. "The ones who listen." Dad stepped closer. "Mom, look at me." Mom turned her head slightly, just enough that I saw her profile. Her eyes were wide, reflecting the moon pool light. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but her mouth was smiling. I can't stop hearing it, she whispered. It's in the pipes. It's in the hull. It's inside my teeth. Dad reached for her shoulder. The moment his fingers touched her, Mom jerked like she'd been shocked. Her smile vanished. She spun toward him, eyes blazing with raw, human terror. Don't, she hissed. Dad froze. I'm trying to help you. Mom's voice cracked. I don't want it, she whispered. I don't want to lose myself. Dad swallowed hard. You won't, he said, and the line was obvious, because he'd already lost parts of himself and didn't even notice. Mom looked at me then, really looked. Her gaze sharpened, like she was trying to find a version of me from a week ago. You drank it, she said, voice shaking with accusation. I didn't deny it. Mom's face crumpled. God, she whispered. They got you too. They didn't get me. I snapped, and the words came out harsh, defensive. I was drowning. I was alone. It made it stop. Mom's eyes filled again. I'm your mother, she whispered. You were never alone. Yeah. I shot back, anger flaring. Where the fuck were you when Dad hit me? Where were you when you drank gray sludge and smiled while I begged you not to? Mom flinched like I slapped her. Dad's face tightened. Don't talk to her like that. Why not? I snapped, turning on him. You want me to pretend everything was fine? You want me to. A ping sounded, loud enough that all three of us froze. Not through the walls. From the water. The glass vibrated faintly under Mom's palm. Ping. Mom's breath hitched. Her eyes, unfocused again, pulled toward the sound like a magnet. Dad's voice went small. We have to leave, he whispered. Mom didn't move. Dad grabbed her arm, firmer now. We're leaving. Mom's face twisted in panic. No, she gasped. If I leave, she swallowed hard. It'll keep knocking. Dad's grip tightened. Let it knock. Mom's eyes snapped to his, and for a second there was pure hatred in them. You don't hear it, she spat. You don't hear what it's saying. Dad's jaw clenched. I don't want to. Mom's lips trembled. I do, she whispered. And that's the problem. She yanked her arm free, stumbling backward until her spine hit the glass. Dad stepped toward her again. Mom's hand shot out, pressing flat against his chest. Don't, she said, voice low, suddenly calm. If you come closer, I'll scream. I'll wake everyone, and then you'll see what it looks like when the whole habitat comes. Dad froze, breath ragged. I stared at her, heart pounding. What do you mean comes? Mom's eyes slid to me, sad. The line, she whispered. The hands. The shoulders. She swallowed. They'll all come here. I felt a shiver crawl up my spine, remembering the kids at the moon pool, the procession, the synchronized turning of heads. Dad's voice broke. Please, he whispered. Come home. Mom closed her eyes. Tears slid down. I can't, she said. Dad took a step back, like he'd been shoved. Mom opened her eyes again, and the fear in them softened, replaced by something exhausted. I can make it stop, she whispered. Dad's face tightened. Ow! Mom's gaze flicked to the bottle bracket mounted on the hub wall. Emergency rations stored there for dive teams. In the bracket sat a single bottle, larger than ours, labeled with the same dolphin. But the liquid inside wasn't black. It was clear like water. Only it wasn't water. It moved wrong, slow, thick like glass before it hardens. Mom's eyes fixed on it like it was salvation. Dad saw it too and went pale. No, he said, immediate. No, don't. Mom's smile trembled back on her face. It's the first, she whispered. The first feed. Dad shook his head, backing away. Mom, don't drink that. Mom's eyes narrowed. You did, she whispered. Dad's voice went harsh. Not that. Mom laughed softly. What's the difference? Dad opened his mouth and couldn't answer. Mom stepped toward the bracket. Dad lunged, grabbing her wrist. Stop. Mom's face twisted in rage and pain. Let go of me, she snapped. No. Mom's voice rose. Let go. Dad didn't. Mom screamed. Not a horror movie scream. Not dramatic. A raw, guttural sound of a person being torn in half. The hub lights flickered. From somewhere down the loop, I heard doors opening. Hatches unsealing. Soft footsteps. Then more. Then many. A hush fell, like the habitat itself leaned in. Mom's scream cut off abruptly. She went still, breathing hard, eyes wide like she realized what she'd done. Dad's grip loosened. "You," he whispered, horrified. Mom's voice dropped to a whisper. "I'm sorry," she said. From a loop entrance to the hub, shapes appeared. People, neighbors, kids, Ms. Halvorson, Carter, Mia. They filed in silently, single file, hands on shoulders, faces calm and blank, eyes reflecting the hub lights. They stopped in a semicircle behind us, just like the kids had days ago. They didn't speak. They just watched. My skin prickled, but not with fear, with pressure, with that humming current feeling. Dad turned, seeing them, and his face went white. "Oh my God," he whispered. Mom trembled. I didn't want them to, but it was too late. Carter stepped forward first, calm as ever. He looked at Mom and spoke softly, like he was comforting her. "It's okay," he said. "We're here." Mia stepped forward too, eyes shining. "We're all here," she echoed. Ms. Halvorson smiled at Dad, and it was the most unsettling thing because it looked like genuine kindness with nothing behind it. "You don't have to struggle," she said. Dad backed away from them, shaking his head. "No," he said, voice rising. "No, fuck this. This isn't." Carter tilted his head. "Pressure hurts," he said, like it was a fact. Dad's voice cracked. "My wife is having a breakdown, and you're..." "What?" "You're gonna feed her more of that shit." Mia's smile softened. "It won't hurt anymore," she whispered. Dad turned on me then, desperate. "Tell them to stop," he begged, like I had authority. "Tell them to leave her alone." I stared at him and felt torn, old loyalty and new current pulling me in different directions. I opened my mouth, and what came out wasn't what I meant to say. "It's okay," I heard myself whisper. Dad stared at me like I betrayed him. I hated that look. I hated how much it hurt. Mom reached for the clear bottle with shaking hands. Dad lunged again, but two neighbors stepped forward and gently caught his arms. Not violently, just firmly, like restraining someone who's panicking. Dad struggled, snarling, "Get off me," his eyes flashed. "Let me go." They didn't answer. They just held. Mom lifted the clear bottle, fingers trembling around the cap. Dad's voice broke. "Honey, please." Mom looked at him, tears streaming. "I can't do this," she whispered. "I can't keep hearing it." Dad's face crumpled. "Then let's go to the surface," he begged. "We'll go. We'll." Mom's laugh was wet and broken. "There's no surface for us," she whispered. Then she twisted the cap. The tamper ring snapped loud in the hub. Everyone behind us lifted their hands to their throats in unison. Mom put the bottle to her lips and drank. The clear liquid slid down her throat like water. For a second, nothing happened. Then Mom's body sagged like a puppet whose strings were cut. Her shoulders dropped. Her face smoothed. Her eyes went wide, then softened into a calm that looked like sleep. She exhaled, long and steady. Dad went still in the neighbor's grip, watching her. Mom smiled. "It's quiet," she whispered, awe in her voice. "It's finally quiet." Dad's eyes filled with tears. "Is it you?" he whispered. Mom looked at him like she loved him and like she didn't recognize him. Both at once. "It's us," she whispered. She turned toward the moon pool glass again, pressing her palm against it. The water behind the glass shifted. A pale shape glided close, slow, deliberate. This time, it pressed something against the glass from the other side. Not a hand. Not exactly. A flat, pale surface like skin stretched over cartilage, with faint ridges like gills. The glass vibrated. Ping. Mom's smile widened. "Hello," she whispered. The semicircle of people behind us murmured softly, a sound like waves under a pier. Dad's face twisted in horror. He fought the grip holding him again, but it was pointless. He wasn't strong enough against two grown men and a woman who worked rig maintenance. He looked at me again, pleading. "Son," he whispered, "please." The old part of me, the part that remembered fear, rose up and wanted to help him. Then I tasted sweetness lingering on my tongue and felt the current pull, warm, comforting. I stepped toward Dad. His eyes brightened, hope flaring. I reached up and touched his cheek. Gentle. Drink, I whispered. Dad recoiled like I burned him. No, he said, voice shaking. No, I'm not. Carter stepped forward behind me, calm as a priest. It's harder if you fight, he said. Dad snapped, rage flaring. Shut the fuck up. Carter's smile didn't move. Pressure hurts, he repeated. Dad spat. I'd rather hurt than whatever this is. Mia stepped closer, voice soft. You're already hurting. Dad glared at her. You're a kid. You don't even. Mia's eyes widened, and for a second, just a second, I saw something like sadness in them. Real sadness. Then it smoothed away. We're all kids, she whispered. Down here. Dad's jaw trembled. He looked at Mom, calm and smiling at the glass. He looked at the neighbors, serene and unblinking. He looked at me. Then he whispered, broken, I don't want to lose you. I swallowed hard. I was already gone, I said softly, and I hated myself for it and loved the relief it brought at the same time. Dad shook his head, tears spilling. No, he whispered. No, you're my boy. I reached for the bottle bracket, grabbed one of the black bottles someone had brought. No idea who. It just appeared in my hands like it belonged there. I held it up to Dad. Dad's lips pulled back in a snarl. Get that away from me. Behind us, the crowd murmured again. The sound vibrated through the hub like distant surf. The lights flickered. For a second, the glass of the moon pool didn't reflect the hub. It reflected open ocean, black, endless, full of drifting pale shapes like lanterns. Then it snapped back. Dad's face went slack. He stared at the glass, breath hitching. Do you see it? Mom whispered, still facing the water. It's beautiful. Dad's shoulders sagged. He wasn't calm yet. He was exhausted. He looked at the bottle like it was a gun, like it was surrender. He whispered, I'm sorry. I didn't know if he meant to Mom, to me, to himself. Then he opened his mouth and drank. Just one swallow. His face twitched like he expected pain. Instead, his shoulders dropped. He exhaled, his eyes unfocused for a second, then softened. He drank again, then again. The neighbors released his arms, and he didn't even notice. Dad lowered the bottle and looked at me like he was seeing me clearly for the first time in a long time. I love you, he whispered. My throat tightened. I love you too, I said, and it felt true. That's the sick part. It felt true. The hub hummed with quiet satisfaction, like a machine settling into proper operation. Mom pressed her forehead against the moon pool glass, smiling. Carter put a hand on my shoulder, light, friendly. Mia squeezed my hand. Ms. Halvorson whispered, good. And behind all that, under the habitat's pumps and the people's breathing, the knocking continued, steady, patient, like a heartbeat from outside. Top, 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 top. In the days after, nobody talked about going to the surface. Nobody talked about Rourke. I asked once, out of a lingering curiosity, where did Rourke go? Dad blinked, genuinely confused. Who? My stomach tightened, a flicker of old fear. Carter answered for him, calm. He delivered what he could, he said. Then he stopped. What do you mean stop? I asked. Carter's head tilted. He listened too hard, he said softly. He wasn't fed enough. I should have pushed. I should have demanded details. I should have asked who the tall milkman was, what he was, why he moved wrong, why he ate bottles. But the urge to question felt like pushing against a current. It made my head ache, and every time I felt that ache, I drank and it softened. The milk became routine the way oxygen had been routine. Every morning, the bracket outside our hatch held bottles. Sometimes 2, sometimes 4, sometimes 6. The liquids changed. One week it was gray again, thick, tasting like sweet metal and cold stone. Another week it was white, so bright it looked like it glowed, and it tasted like sugar and salt and something faintly floral, like seaweed crushed in your hands. Sometimes, late at night, I'd wake up and find a bottle on the table that hadn't been there before. No label, no Dalfin, just clear plastic filled with black liquid that moved like it was alive. Those bottles felt special. Those were the ones the milkman wanted most. I started seeing him more often after I drank. Not because he came more often, Because I noticed. The trolley would glide past the viewport, silent. The tall figure pushing it would pause and look toward our module sometimes, head tilting. I never saw his face, but I started getting the sense that he wasn't hiding it from me anymore. He was hiding it from the part of me that still remembered being afraid. One night, I opened the viewport latch. Just a crack like I had with Rourke. The loop air flooded in, cold and damp. The milkman stopped instantly. Trolley halted mid-roll. He didn't turn his head. He didn't move. He just stood there, silent, like a diver holding still to avoid startling a fish. My heart beat steady. No panique. He whispered. The milkman's shoulders rose and fell in a slow breath. Then his head tilted just slightly toward me. And for the first time, I heard something from him that wasn't chewing. It sounded like a deep exhale through water. Not words, not a voice, more like a pressure release, a vibration that made my teeth buzz. The screen in our module ticked louder in response, like it was translating. Tick, tick, tick. A pattern formed in my head, simple, undeniable. Welcome. The milkman pushed the trolley forward again, rolling past, and as he did, I saw his hand reach into the crate and lift an empty bottle. He held it to his face. Crunch, crunch, crunch. The sound didn't make me sick anymore. It made me feel safe, because if he was eating the empties, then nothing was wasted. Everything cycled. Everything fed something else. Closed system. Perfect. The military side stopped pretending. The officers stopped wearing surface uniforms and started wearing the same coveralls as everyone else. They stopped carrying rifles. They stopped doing drills. They spent more time at the moon pool. Sometimes I'd see them standing there with their hands on the glass, like kids at an aquarium, faces calm. The sonar room, the military listening post bolted onto the habitat's underside, went quiet. Not silent, quiet in a different way. One of the older techs, a man named Haskins, cornered my dad in the loop one day. I overheard it because hatches don't block sound well, and people forget that. Haskins whispered, voice trembling, "We're not listening anymore." Dad replied, calm, "We're hearing." Haskins swallowed hard. "You know what I mean? We used to ping out. We used to map the canyon. We used to make sure nothing got too close." Dad's voice stayed soft. "Nothing is too close." Haskins's breath hitched. "They're right under us," he whispered. "Do you know what that means? There's structure. There's movement. There's..." Dad cut him off, gentle. "Don't make it ugly." Haskins's voice rose, frantic. "Ugly? This is the bottom of the goddamn ocean. It's always ugly." Dad's tone hardened just slightly. "It's only ugly if you fight it." Haskins made a sound like he might cry. "I don't want to be food," he whispered. Dad didn't answer right away. Then, quietly, "You won't be," he said. "Not if you drink." Haskins laughed, broken. "So that's it," he whispered. "Join or drown." Dad's voice went softer. "We were always drowning," he said. Haskins walked away after that. I never saw him again. Not as himself, anyway. A week later, I saw him in the loop line, hands on shoulders, face calm, eyes reflecting the habitat lights. He caught my eye as he passed and gave me a small smile, like he was grateful. I stopped having nightmares. I stopped getting headaches. I stopped feeling that tight, angry loneliness that had lived in me even before any of this started. Instead, I felt connected, not in a cheesy, human way. Not we're all friends. More like the habitat was a body, and I was finally aware of being part of it. When a pump cycled, I felt it in my chest. When a valve hissed, I tasted sweetness. When the hull creaked under pressure, my bones hummed with it. Sometimes when I drank too fast, I get a rush behind my eyes, a brief, dizzy, floaty feeling like nitrogen narcosis. But it wasn't scary. It was like stepping out of your own head and seeing the loop from above, seeing the habitat like a glowing ring in black water, and below it, deep below it, seeing faint lights. Not bioluminescent fish. Lights like windows. A city. I didn't tell anyone about the city at first, because the words felt too small. But one day, Mia whispered to me in class, Did you see the lights? Istère derrière. She smiled, and her eyes shimmered with reflected symbols. They're waiting, she whispered. Waiting. That word used to scare me. Now it felt like an invitation. The surface became a rumor. People stopped talking about weather, about sun, about rain. Those words started sounding childish, like fairy tales. The screen stopped showing normal channels entirely. All symbols, all ticking all the time. And the symbols weren't painful anymore. They were comforting. Sometimes I'd sit in a module with Dad and Mom, all three of us staring at the screen, bottles in our hands, not speaking. And it wasn't awkward. It was peaceful. You'd think that's where the horror ends, where everyone just becomes calm underwater zombies and the narrator's like, "Welp, guess I'm a fish now." But it didn't feel like that inside. Inside, it felt like relief. And I hate myself for saying that because I know how it sounds. I know what you're thinking. I thought it too once. Then the habitat started changing. Not physically at first. Not new corridors suddenly appearing. Not walls stretching like I'd seen in that flicker. It started with sound. The dripping that used to annoy me stopped. Not because the leak got fixed. Because the drip became synchronized. Drip. Pause. Drip, drip. Pause. A rhythm that matched the pings outside. Then the ventilation started doing it too. Tiny shifts in airflow that made a faint whistle like breath through teeth. At night, if you lay your cheek against the wall, you could feel vibrations subtle, traveling through metal. Some people started sleeping with their hands on the bulkhead, like they were holding hands with the habitat itself. Mom did that. Dad did that. I did it too. One night, while my palm rested against the wall, I felt something respond. Not imagination, not wishful thinking. A faint pressure from the other side of the metal, like someone pressing back. My breath caught, not in fear but in awe. I whispered hello. The wall vibrated softly. Top, 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 like a reply. The next morning, the bracket outside our hatch held a bottle I'd never seen before. No label, no dolphin, just a bottle filled with clear liquid, like the one Mom drank at the hub. I held it up to the light. The liquid caught the green glow of the habitat lamps and refracted it in strange angles, like it was bending light the way deep water bends sound. Dad watched me, expression calm. "That's for you," he said. My throat tightened. "Why?" Dad's smile softened. "Because you listened," he said. Mom touched my shoulder, gentle. "Because you stopped fighting," she whispered. I stared at the bottle. A week ago, the idea of drinking clear, unknown liquid from the bottom of the ocean would have made me vomit. Now it felt important. I twisted the cap. The tamper ring didn't snap. There wasn't one. I hesitated, bottle at my lips. Dad's hand squeezed my shoulder once, reassuring. Mom smiled like she was proud. I drank. The liquid tasted like nothing. Not sweet. Not metallic. Not seawater. Nothing at all. It slid down my throat smooth as air. For a second, I thought it hadn't worked. That it was just water, that I'd been tricked. Then the world shifted. Not visually like a hallucination. More like my brain widened. Like a door in my head opened and let in a sound I'd been hearing muffled my whole life. The pings outside weren't just pings anymore. They were language. Knock sequences. Calls. I heard them with clarity, like someone finally adjusted a radio tuner. And under the knocks, deeper like bass under a song, I heard voices. Not human voices. A chorus of pressure and vibration, like whales singing through pipes. My knees went weak. I grabbed the table to steady myself. Mom's face blurred with tears. "There you are," she whispered. Dad's eyes shone. "Welcome," he said, the same word-eyed fell from Milkman. I opened my mouth to speak and realized I didn't need to. Because the habitat heard me anyway. Because the water heard me. Because the city below heard me. That day, school ended early. Not officially. Nobody announced it. We all just stood up at the same time and walked out. Single file. Hands on shoulders. Down the loop. Toward the hub. Toward the moon pool. The line felt normal now. Comforting. Like being part of a body moving together. I felt Dad's hand on my shoulder in front of me. Mom's hand on my shoulder behind me. Their touch was warm through coveralls, grounding. We enter the hub. The moon pool glass shimmered under the dim lights. On the other side, the water was darker than ever, but now I could see into it. Not with my eyes exactly. With that widened sense. There were shapes down there. Pale, smooth, moving in slow spirals. There were structures, geometric shadows that didn't match rock. Patterns that looked like the symbols on the screen, but built out of coral and metal and bone, layered over centuries. And there were lights. Windows. A city. People pressed their palms to the glass. I pressed mine too. The glass vibrated under my skin. Ping, ping, ping. A knock pattern that felt like a greeting. My chest filled with warmth. I knocked back with my knuckles. Talp, talp, talp. The semicircle of people behind me murmured softly, like the habitat was exhaling. Then the pressure gates under the moon pool shifted. A low, deep mechanical groan filled the hub as the internal lock cycled. People didn't flinch. They leaned in. Dad whispered, voice reverent, "It's opening." The moon pool was a shaft of water sealed by gates so divers could enter and exit without flooding the habitat. You didn't open it unless you were doing a controlled dive. You definitely didn't open it with a crowd of civilians and kids standing around. But the lock cycled anyway. Because the habitat wanted it. Because the water wanted it. Because the knocks outside matched the lock's mechanism like a key. The surface of the moon pool water rippled, reflecting green light. Cold, damp air rose from it, carrying a smell like deep ocean, brine and stone, and something faintly sweet. One of the military officers stepped forward, calm, and removed his boots. He didn't look afraid. He looked grateful. He stepped into the moon pool and sank, disappearing under the surface without struggling, like the water welcomed him. Another followed, then another. People started moving, not rushing, not panicking, just taking turns. I felt a flicker of old fear rise, drowning fear, survival instinct. Then I heard the knocks, clear as speech. Not an order, en assurance. Pressure doesn't hurt if you stop fighting it. My lungs tightened, but the fear didn't bloom. Dad turned and cupped my face in his hands. His palms were warm. "You don't have to go," he whispered. I stared at him, surprised by the words. Mom stepped close too, smiling softly. "But you can," she whispered. I looked at the moon pool. The water surface rippled gently, like breathing. Under it, pale shapes moved closer, curious. Not hungry, curious, like I was a neighbor coming home. I took a step forward. Dad's hand stayed on my shoulder, light. Mom's fingers squeezed mine. I wasn't thinking about the surface anymore. About sunlight. About anything above. I was thinking about not being alone. I was thinking about how the habitat had always been a cul-de-sac, a closed loop, and now the loop had an exit. Not up, down. I sat on the edge of the moon pool and dipped my toes in. The water was ice cold, and it should have shocked me into panic. Instead, it felt clean, honest. I slid in. The water swallowed me, pressure hugging my body. For a second, my chest clenched, and I kicked instinctively, trying to find footing that didn't exist. Then I relaxed. I let myself float just under the surface. The sounds of the hub muffled instantly, replaced by the deep, thick quiet of water. And in that quiet, the knocks were everywhere, through the walls, through my bones. I exhaled slowly and watched bubbles rise, silver, vanishing into ripples. A pale shape moved closer beneath me, just out of sight. I didn't thrash. I didn't scream. I reached down with my hand, palm open. Something brushed my fingers. Smooth, cold, slightly ridged, not slimy, not sharp, just present. A vibration traveled through my hand, a knock pattern. Talp, 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 talp. Welcome. My eyes burned with tears, even underwater. I kicked gently and sank a little deeper. The habitat lights faded above me. The moon pool walls became a dark cylinder. And below, faint lights glowed. Windows, shapes moved around them, slow and graceful. Not human, not monsters in the way movies make them. Something older, Something built for pressure and darkness and the long patience of the deep. I should have been terrified. I wasn't. I felt held. I don't remember exactly how I got back into the hub. I don't remember climbing out. I just remember being wrapped in towels, shivering and laughing breathless while Mom cried and Dad hugged me and the neighbors murmured like waves. After that, the habitat didn't feel like a prison at all. It felt like a dock, a place you passed through on the way to somewhere else. People started leaving one by one, down through the moon pool. Not all at once. Not dramatic. Just drifting away from their modules, their old routines, their old anger. Hatches stayed open. Personal items got left behind. Photos, clothes, old toys. Nobody cared. The milk kept coming. And the milkman kept pushing his silent trolley, collecting empties, eating them, replacing them. Sometimes when I caught him in the loop, he'd stop and tilt his head at me, like he recognized me now. Once, just once, I swear he lifted his cap a fraction, and in the shadow under it, I saw a hint of pale skin, smooth as the shape in the water. No verdad, no pores, just wrong in a quiet way. I didn't recoil. I nodded. He set a bottle into my bracket and rolled on. The last time I saw the surface was on a screen, not a normal broadcast. A camera feed from the skiff, flickering and grainy, showing gray dawn on a choppy sea. For a moment, the sight made my chest ache, an old memory of wind and sun and being able to breathe without hearing pumps. Then the symbols crawled over it, replacing the image, covering it like algae. Tick, 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 and I didn't miss it anymore. People ask, well, you would ask if you were still thinking like a surface person, what happened to Pelican Bay habitat? It didn't implode. It didn't flood in some big dramatic disaster. There wasn't a Mayday broadcast or a heroic rescue. It just went quiet. Ships stopped getting responses. The military stopped filing reports. The corporate hotline stopped answering. From above, it probably looked like any other dead installation, just another piece of metal resting on the seafloor. But down below, in the dark, it was still lit, still humming, still connected. The loop wasn't empty. It just wasn't for humans anymore. Sometimes I still dream in old shapes, my childhood on the loop, scooter wheels squeaking, Carter calling me Milk Boy, Mom's hands around me too tight. In the dream, I'm furious. I am lonely. I'm banging on a hatch that won't open. Then I hear it. Top, top, top. And the anger dissolves like sugar in water. I wake up calm. I wake up listening. Because the knocks never stop. They're in the hull of every ship that passes overhead. They're in the pipes under coastal towns. They're in the deep cables that carry your internet, your calls, your stupid little videos you watch at 2 a.m. while the rain taps your window. You think those noises are just the ocean settling. You think the faint ticking in your speakers is static. You think the weird sweet metal taste in your mouth sometimes is just a filling or a nosebleed. It's not. It's a knock. It's a call. It's an offering. I'm happy now. I don't argue anymore. I don't swing at people. I don't sit awake at night feeling like the walls are closing in. I feel the current. I feel the connection. And I know the milkman is still doing his rounds. Not with a trolley, not always with bottles you can see. Sometimes it's a package that arrives sealed and cold at a dockside facility. Sometimes it's a crate that shows up on a trawler with no paperwork. Sometimes it's just a new nutrient supplement your company starts handing out because it's good for morale. It always comes with a smile on the label. It always tastes sweet, metallic like sugar and seawater. You don't have to be underwater to drink it. You just have to be lonely enough to want the knocking to stop. And you will. Once the new milkman starts his rounds where you live.